And welcome. It truly is a joy and an honor to be here to do a 30-hour course in 45 minutes. And thank you, Premier Clark, for inviting me. I used to do the radio show once in a while on her radio show, so it really is a joy to be here. I talk fast. Those of you who've ever heard me know I do it. Don't talk as fast as I used to. This is gray hair, and I'm 65. So that'll answer some of your questions. I'm also, as Premier alluded to, a former Franciscan nun. Obviously former, with a husband and 3 kids. And no, I didn't marry a priest, and yes, I met him after I left the convent. So that'll answer all you Catholics' questions for the day. And before I start on mine, coming from a family with police officers, I would just extend a gentle peace to all of you today in the police force dealing with a tremendous loss of one of your own. So it is a bit somber to have to deal with that and faced with all that we're dealing with today. So I do wish you a gentle peace because our families deal with this. We have the NYDP. I'm from New York originally, so. And yes, I am an American. I love Canada. I'm on my way to the Yukon. It's a little colder there. I thought I could Skype up there, maybe instead of going, but I will go. The title of my work is The Bully, the Bullied, and the Bystander. William Burroughs, the English author, said it so beautifully: there are no innocent bystanders. What were you doing there in the first place? And my role as an educator, as a grandparent now, as a community person and someone who works all over the world, my goal is to raise a generation of kids who are the fourth character, that ally, that witness, resistor, and defender. When that high-status social bully says to all the other girls, I don't like the new girl. You want to be in my group? You won't eat lunch with her either. You see, I want the young people here, and I want all of us who have sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters to have a kid who says, that's mean, that's cruel, and has the courage to go sit next to the new girl, because it takes a lot of courage to do that, because she's not going to get scratch and sniff stickers and stars, lunch with the principal, catch a being good award. She's going to get, oh, Miss Goody Two-Shoes, or you're next. And I want your sons, when their friends say, look at that kid over there, different skin color, religion, gender, physical or mental ability, the big 5 for hate crimes. What makes a hate crime different than any other crime? It's criminal bullying. Let's go mess him up. I want your sons to be the one to say no. When the burden's heavy, when their friends say, what are you, chicken? What are you, just like them? No. But how on earth do we begin as a community to raise a generation of kids who will stand up for values and against injustices, who are not easily led, who don't do to please, who have what Carl Sagan said all 3-year-olds have? And the beauty of what we're talking to so many of the young people here is you have that gift of skepticism and wonder. Why and wow. Wow, look at the spaghetti. Wow, look at the snow. Wow, look at the rain. Wow, wow, wow. And why? Well, I want 16-year-olds to have that wow and why that 3-year-olds have. They tend not to harm themselves and others when they do, when they have that wow. And the why, when their friends say, let's go vandalize that building, they go, why would I do that? But how do we begin to raise a generation who are not swimming in a culture of mean, but are truly interconnected, interrelated, and interdependent? Who recognize what Martin Buber said, I am I and you are thou. I'm unique, you're unique, and we have a common humanity. That's the we. Archbishop Desmond Tutu called about the Ubuntu, our connectedness. I tell students, you do not have to like every kid in this classroom. You don't. But you must honor their humanity. You must treat them with dignity and regard. How many of you have an adolescent at home right now? I'll bet some of you do not like your teenager right now. You do not like them. And you say, oh no, politically correct, I don't like his behavior. You don't like him. You don't want to go home. But you love them deeply, and you would be there for the haul. They get in trouble, you'd get down there as fast as you can, put your arm around them and say, we love you. You're in trouble. We know you can handle it. Brought a list of lawyers we think might take your case. Good luck, buddy. But you're there. You see, that's what I'm asking young people to be, is to be there when all those other kids decide it's cool to be mean. And they themselves get locked in what is known as the trap of comradeship. Now, I work in Rwanda with orphans from the 1994 genocide. Don't ever ask Stephen Lewis if there's anything you can do for him. You will end up in Africa. Yes. No, I love it. And these kids, in 100 days, almost 1 million human beings were macheted to death. And we as a community in the world sat by and watched. We were those disengaged onlookers. And the premise of my genocide book is that it is a short walk from schoolyard bullying to hate crimes, which is on the rise in your country and mine, to genocide. Genocide is not an unimaginable horror. It was thoroughly imagined, meticulously planned, horrifically carried out by people who turned other human beings into an it. Not a thou, but an it. And once you're an it to me, I can do anything to you and not feel any shame or compassion. I can take a Matthew Shepard, beat him up, tie him to a fence post, leave him to die in Laramie, Wyoming. And when those 2 young boys were arrested, they said, yeah, but he was gay. Take a black man in Jasper, Texas, James Byrd, drag him in the back of a pickup. And when those 3 kids were arrested, they said, yeah, but he was black. Renee Virk. 100 kids knew about her death before her parents and the police. 25 of her normal classmates cheered those kids on as they broke her arms before they drowned her. And one of the young girls charged said, well, she was brown, ugly, and fat. I didn't like her. Another girl said, I couldn't stand the sound of her voice. And another girl said, well, I was only doing what they told me to do. Utter contempt for another human being. You see, conflict's normal, natural, and necessary. Bullying is none of that. It's not a rite of passage. It's not normal things that kids do. No, it's about utter contempt for another human being. And that is a learned behavior. I'm old enough to know the song from South Pacific. You have to be carefully taught to hate before you're 6, 7, or 8 to hate the people your relatives hate. So how do you treat hired help? How do you treat somebody moving through the grocery store a little slower than you'd like them to? How do you treat that new neighbor who looks different than you, has different culture, different languages, their first language, skin's a different color, faith traditions different. English is not their first language. Your children are watching. And by the way, how do you treat that bigoted relative at the family gathering? Now, we all have bigoted relatives somewhere in the family tree. Some aren't on the branches yet. They're right there at the dinner table, spewing racist and sexist comments, thinly disguised as a joke. Can your children hear you saying, I'm bothered by that, or that was mean, or that was cruel, when all the other relatives roll their eyes and say, what, can't you take a joke? Not that kind. And you know you've had an impact when you walk back in the dining room and everybody shuts up. But you've had an even bigger impact on your children. As your mother-in-law is saying, look, it's Uncle George, can't you just let it go? No. Because your children need to see you standing up for a value and against an injustice when it's uncomfortable to do it. If we are ever going to ask these young people in a closed system called school to go sit next to the new girl at cost, to say to the other kids in the locker room, back off, leave them alone. You see, there are those 3 characters in this horrific tragedy that goes from bullying to hate crimes to genocide. You see, a hate crime is that social assassination that Teresa talked about. But it began with bullying and escalated to criminal bullying, the hate crime. And in Rwanda, a genocide. You see, they didn't kill Tutsis in Rwanda, they killed cockroaches. And what do you do with a cockroach? You exterminate them. In Nazi Germany, they didn't kill Jews, they killed vermin and bacteria eating at the fabric of our society. What do you do with vermin? You exterminate it. But it didn't start with the death camps, it started with verbal bullying, making somebody into an it. And that's why you and I have to say, no more, not here, never. This is safe harbor for every kid in our schools. Well, I only called her a gross name. Only called her a gross name? No. That is step 1. And Herbert Kelman, who wrote about genocide, there are 3 conditions for a genocide. And one of the things the premier is looking at is creating a different climate where kids aren't swimming in a culture of mean, where it is one of deep, deep caring. And if these 3 conditions exist for a genocide, then where does it start? Somebody once said to me, interviewing me when I put the book out on genocide, I thought you talked about parenting. I said, where do you think it starts? 3 conditions: unquestioning obedience to authority, the routinization of cruelty, and the dehumanization of another human being. Unquestioning obedience to authority. That's why it's so critical that we ask these young people to know how to think, not just what to think. Because they have to question that high-status social bully who says, I don't like the new girl, we're not going to eat with her. Wow. Why would I obey her? And that's why we don't want to raise praise-dependent, reward-dependent children who will do to please us when they're little, but will do to please their peers when they're older. Are any of you raising a strong-willed child? Say, that's why I got here early. Staying late. Get out of the house. Let me tell you something about a strong-willed child you may not fully appreciate yet. They're easier on us in the older teen years than compliant children. But if you think about it, it makes sense. You see, compliant children are very easily led when they're little for two things: approval and to please adults. They're just as easily led in the teen years for those same two things: approval and to please their peers. Now, strong-willed children, if you can get them up to puberty with both of you still excited about life, are never easily led by anybody, first by you, but also not by their peers. So I want you to go home and give that kid a hug and say, I knew there was a reason we were getting you up to puberty. You see, we want them to stand up for values and against injustices, but they must believe at a very young age that they can make lots of decisions and they'll be held accountable for their behavior. Then they believe they have agency in their life and that they can stand up for that other person, to be that witness, resistor, and defender, to be that ally. And we say, but he's only in middle school. How can he do that? I ask a lot of people about stories. When I was writing the book, Derek Okubo, internationally renowned for his work in conflict resolution, told me a story that happened to him 35 years ago, as if it happened yesterday. He was the only Japanese-American child in Denver, Colorado, in that grade 2 classroom. His parents and grandparents had been interned, much as David Suzuki was in Toronto, being ripped from this province during World War II because of his ethnicity. But Derek's grandparents and parents were interned, and then his father served in the Air Force. But there was a lot of anti-Japanese sentiment, as he was the only Japanese-American in that grade 2 classroom. He had to do a toe-heel, heel together activity. Wasn't doing such a good job of it. His teacher walked over to him, picked him up, and said, you get a you little yellow Jap. Can teachers bully? Absolutely. This little boy who had come to school so alive was now broken. And he went back out on the playground, and a group of kids, emboldened by what the teacher said and probably what they learned at home, go back where you came from, you little yellow Jap. He said, but one boy, Scott Russell, remembers his name 35 years later, came running over, 7 years old, and said, stop that, that's mean. He said, Derek, come play with me. You don't need those boys. And Derek said, the rage that was growing in me was cooled by a little boy willing to stand up and speak out. But he did that at cost, because the next day the other kid said, Jap lover, Jap lover, Jap lover. So Derek said, you don't have to play with me if they're going to call you those names. Scott Russell, 7 years old, said, it's their problem, not mine. That's the kind of kid you want. That's the kid who will break this cycle of violence. That's that fourth character. Unquestioning obedience to authority. The routinization of cruelty. I'm often asked if I'm concerned about violence kids are exposed to. I am. But you know what? I'm just as concerned about the humor they're exposed to. Bill Cosby said it so beautifully, I do miss the days when comedy wasn't mean, when it wasn't at the expense of another human being. What is bullying? A conscious, willful, deliberate activity intended to harm, where you get pleasure from somebody else's pain. It's about laughing at their pain. That's not normal, natural, or necessary. We need to grimace at somebody else's pain. We need to be upset that somebody is in pain. But bullying is the antithesis of that. It's everyone standing around laughing at somebody in absolute distress. So the routinization of cruelty, where it becomes the norm, where people will say, it's just part of growing up. Boys will be boys, girls just want to be mean. It is not. It should never be a part of any kid's childhood. And the third, the dehumanization of another human being. And that's why it is so critical that we stop the most common form of bullying, verbal bullying. Boys and girls do that one equally well. You know that adage, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, is a lie. Ask Dawn Marie Wesley's mom. Dawn Marie hung herself with a dog's leash, having moved from Ontario to British Columbia. Left a suicide note naming the 3 girls who had only verbally tormented her every day. And the 2 tools kids use today, those of us who are older here, never had to deal with them. Cell phones and the internet, the cyberbullying. The last thing Dawn Marie Wesley heard on her cell phone was one of those girls saying, "We'd all be better off if you were dead," and by morning she was. We ignore this at every kid's peril. But that dehumanization has got to stop. We cannot tolerate it. And as I said, I'm a former nun, so I'll throw this in. Intolerance, bigotry, and hatred cloaked in the garb of religion is still intolerance, bigotry, and hatred. And we need to get a handle on that and be willing to stand up and speak out when somebody spews utter contempt for another human being and then cloaks it in a faith tradition. How dare we? Religion can be a vessel or a tomb, a weapon or a tool, and it's how it's expressed. Our cultural norms can be any of those as well. It's how we express it. And our young people have to be taught to hate. And we mustn't be vessels for that hatred. We have to be the ones to say no. But there is a bully circle, because bullies don't tend to do this alone. In the center, we have the target. And why do I use that word? Gavin de Becker, who worked with people who had been stalked. He wrote the book, Gift of Fear. Fascinating book. He talked about how that inner fear, that natural fear, keeps us alive. We don't want to be fearful, but we want to listen to our clues, our body speaking. And many of the people who'd been stalked were beating themselves up for having been in the wrong place, wrong time, wore the wrong clothes. He said, no. You were targeted by that person. The problem's not with you. You were targeted. I want young people to know you can be targeted because you're short, you're tall, you developed early, you developed late, your race, religion, gender, your economic status, the fact that you're new, you developed early, you developed late. The one thing all targeted kids have in common, somebody targeted them. Now, you can be weird, dorky, odd, strange. Have ADHD, Asperger's. I'm a special ed teacher. My degrees are in LD, ED, and MR. Used to say I was the emotionally disturbed teacher. I meant that in more ways than one on some days. But you can be weird, dorky, odd, strange, have ADHD, Asperger's, miss social cues. Nothing justifies mean nothing. You can have social anxieties. That doesn't justify somebody being mean to you, as Jay talked about. Nothing justifies. Do we work on the weird, dorky, odd, strange? Absolutely. But you are the target, and that's what I want young people to understand, is somebody targeted you. Problem's not with you, it's with them. Now, at the very top of the bully circle, you have the bully. Now, we have this idea that all bullies have some problems of their own. Many do, but not all do. I have spent far too much time dealing in bullicide with high-status social bullies. Those kids in the school who had a sense of entitlement, a liberty to exclude, and an intolerance toward differences, and thought they could get away with it because they always have, because they had that sense of entitlement. I was involved with the Phoebe Prince case. Phoebe was from Ireland, new girl, beautiful, had an Irish lilt. I'm Irish, very seductive lilt. And a group of kids decided that they could treat her with utter contempt, and they did for 5 months, till she killed herself. Couldn't take it anymore. Now, people often say, but she had lots of problems and the like. Suicide is very complicated. And I can't say that she would not have killed herself. That January with the silk scarf that her sister gave her for Christmas, I can't tell you that. But what I can assure you is, had those kids not targeted her, had somebody stopped them when they started to target her, had the school, when they first found out about it, done something, and they knew early on, folks. Had their parents been aware of the mean and cruel cyberbullying they were doing on this young girl, been tuned into what their kids were doing, And had Phoebe not been so horribly weakened by all of this, she may not have committed suicide. But one thing I can promise you is the last 5 months of her life would not have been hell. That I do know. And those kids need to be held accountable for what they did. We don't know. And I often hear, studying the most recent suicide here, that, oh, she had a lot of problems, a lot of issues. Yes. And a lot of that was compounded by what was happening to her. It doesn't happen separate. And every kid that fed into that, not so innocent bystanders, by tweeting, by sending messages, by ostracizing, have to be accountable for what they did. Because the bully circle, that trap of comradeship, is there. Right at the top you have the bully. Now, we often don't believe targeted kids when it's a high-status social bully. Amazing to me, even after the 6 kids were held with complicity in the death of Phoebe Prince, and you know, they showed up at the cotillion 3 days later wearing silk scarves, mocking to hang themselves. They defaced her memorial page, made a new one. Mission accomplished, with a noose in her name. Utter contempt for Phoebe. But even after all of that, the superintendent was quoted in the Newsweek saying, but these were nice kids. They came from nice homes. When Tyler Clementi leapt off that bridge, and the young boy complicit in videotaping and then spreading it on the net, inviting friends to watch that intimate encounter that Tyler had had, that would be there forever. There is no delete button on the internet. People rushed to his town, and then when he was charged, Raffi was, but he's a nice kid. Nice kids can be real mean. I need kids who are kind, not mean. You can be nice, and you're usually nice to adults, but mean to that kid you've targeted. Right below them, we have our bully's henchman. Now, you didn't raise him or her to be a bully, but you raised her to do to please. She got all those S++ in behavior. Got the catch and be and good award, lunch with the principal. But now she's doing what that high-status bully tells her to do. Kids who are praise-dependent, reward-dependent, make wonderful henchmen. And right below that is the active supporters. Those are the kids that cheer the bully on, get their cell phones out and video it, put it up on YouTube. The active supporters are part of the problem. Passive supporter? Adults, we won't know about them unless we watch carefully and listen carefully. And we overhear a young person say, ha, 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 do you know what those kids did to that new kid? Or ha, 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 do you know what they did to that boy in the locker room? They're not doing it, but they're getting pleasure. You know what? They're a part of the problem. At the very bottom of the circle is a deadly lot. And all of us adults here can be guilty of this, the disengaged onlooker who turns a blind eye and say, oh, boys will be boys, girls just want to be mean, it's part of growing up. On the upswing, we have that potential witness. That's that young person here who was raised to act with integrity and civility and compassion, but she's afraid of the bully. She's afraid if she steps in, she'll be next. She's afraid if she steps in, she'll make it worse for the target, or she's simply afraid. All of these kids are locked in a trap of comradeship and will begin to justify their meanness by weakening the target even more by saying, well, he is dorky, he is weird, he does have anxieties, you know, he doesn't quite fit. Dark curly hair. And you know, she's new. And you know what? She doesn't play rugby very well. Trying to fault the target, don't let that happen. What we need every one of us to be is that witness, resistor, and defender. Standing up and speaking out, stepping in, doing the right thing when the burden is heavy. It's easy to do it when we're all sitting here. But when the burden's heavy, when it's in those hallways. And you know what? It isn't just our school hallways. It's the climate we create in our communities. We just went through a horrific election, and my state finally went blue. Pardon, my political bias comes out here. But I could not believe the vitriol. We need to be able to disagree without being disagreeable in our politics. And when I work with young people, I talk to them about an old Sufi saying. Sufis are people of wisdom in the Muslim tradition. that our words must pass through 3 gates, and I would love to put it on every parliamentarian's desk and every congressperson's desk, that our words must pass through these 3 gates before you push send. This is the kind of information we need to give kids. First, if it's true. If it's not true, don't say it. If it's kind of true, maybe true, half true, a rumor, don't even go to the next 2 gates. Put it back. Is it necessary to say? Something may be true, but not necessary to tweet all over the place. And the last gate is the hardest gate for all of us to get through. Is it kind? If it's true, necessary, and kind, push send. But if it's not any of that, and you can say things that disagree with somebody else, but not be disagreeable with it and still push send. And when you get a message in your inbox and you know it's coming from somebody who is bigoted and sends racist comments thinly disguised as a joke, do you retweet it? Do you send it on? Then you're a henchman. Do you cheer them on and invite other new ways for them to spread that rumor? You're the active supporter. Do you sit there and laugh and show your friend? Then you're the passive supporter. Do you say, I'm not even going to open it because I know what's in it? You're the disengaged onlooker. The potential witness sits there and goes, oh, I wish they wouldn't send this to me. But the gutsy one, the witness resistor and defender says, I'm sending a message back, please. This is a bigoted comment thinly disguised as a joke. I don't want to be a party to this. Would you delete me? Well, you might get a bit of grief about that. They may send your message around. But others then might say, you know what? I didn't have the courage to say that, but if she's going to say it, then I can send a message, say, I don't like it either. You see, one person taking that you out of bullying, when you take you out of it, that trap of comradeship begins to break down. And when it begins to break down and swings in the other direction, then we are beginning to create a deeply caring community. There are 3 virulent agents ripping apart the fabric of our humanity today. And we've got to look at those if we're going to create the kind of community that will erase bullying. Hating other human beings with utter contempt, putting them outside our circle of caring, making them into its. Hoarding me, mine, and more instead of us, ours, and enough. And harming with lying and cheating and stealing. I know we're at Simon Fraser University. Any of you from Simon Fraser? I always use this as an example. They had a scandal in their graduate school. People were cheating on their ethics exams. Yes, you know. What's wrong with lying and cheating and stealing? First, it destroys your own personal integrity. Secondly, it destroys your relationship with the thou. And when we don't have a relationship, we cannot get community. That's what's wrong with lying and cheating and stealing. So what are the antidotes to hating, hoarding, and harming? And what's so beautiful in British Columbia, and what excites me a lot when Premier Clark called me and asked me to be a part of this, is I do work all over the world. And I had always been very impressed with what New York is doing compared to so much of what's being done in the rest of my country. They had an Anti-Bullying and a Dignity for All Students Act, 2 separate things, but they were the first in my country to connect those 2 intimately. British Columbia truly is a leader here because you didn't connect to, you made them an integral part. That it isn't just anti-bullying. I'm not a real big fan of anti-bullying programs that you drop in, because that's what happens. And people's eyes get to glaze over and we begin to see everything as bullying and don't take it as seriously as bullying needs to be taken. But you have the 3 Ps in place. Strong anti-bullying policies, strong anti-bullying procedures, and more critically, programs, not anti-bullying programs, but programs in place to work against those 3 most virulent agents, hating, hoarding, and harming. The antidotes: care deeply, share generously, help willingly. The more we can get our young people in our communities, starting at a very young age, to care more deeply about one another. Now, caring more deeply has 2 elements. The must to relieve somebody else's suffering and wishing them well. We're hardwired to care, you know. Babies will cry when another baby's in distress. 18-month-old runs over with that blankie to soothe the baby, and they're in distress because the baby's not calming down yet. 2-year-old figures it out. He needs milk, Mom. Get him some milk. And a 4-year-old raised in a deeply caring environment sees a child without a cookie. She'll break her cookie and share. You say, well, sweetheart, that was nice. Why did you do that? She looks at you, nuts lady, he's hungry. And that's before Bible study, catechism class, and character ed programs. It's in them to care. You have to cover it over with an awful lot of muck to get somebody to put somebody outside their circle of caring. You had a wonderful example of this 2 Winter Olympics ago here in Canada when a Canadian skier broke her pole in the middle of a race. Norwegian coach, cheering his own team on, reached out and handed her a pole. You folks came in second, silver medal. Norwegians fourth, no medal. What was that man thinking? People hounded him, why'd you do it, why'd you do it? And he shrugged his shoulders, wasn't a big deal. Somebody else had done it, I not done it. You wonderful Canadians sent him 500 gallons of maple syrup. He's still trying to figure out what to do with 500 gallons of maple syrup. On the third day, a camera crew cornered him and said, why'd you do it? He looked into the camera and he said, because she needed a pole. You see, that's the must to relieve somebody else's suffering and wishing them well and not thinking it through. Dr. Phil and I had a minor disagreement about this. He said, we were on the AC360, Anderson Cooper show, and he was going on before me, and he said, if only, and he meant it, and he's very active in anti-bullying to his credit, but he said, if only bullies knew the pain they were causing their targets, they wouldn't do it. I said, that's not true, Phil. If only they cared that they were causing the pain. It's the difference between ignorance and apathy. The head of the anti-bullying committee in South Hadley, Massachusetts, was one of the 6 charged with complicity in Phoebe's death. He knew what bullying was. He didn't care. You see, it's that awareness to care. We do have to give kids information on what bullying is and what it isn't, but we have to go way beyond that. And that's what erase bullying is all about. Trying to stay on your time schedule here. Yeah. No, it's important for everybody else. So to care deeply, share generously, help willingly. To have those 3 P's in place, we need to be sure that that's happening. And I began my book with a quote from Chocolat. And in the movie Chocolat, a community was going through the Lenten season. Now, almost every faith tradition has a time of removal, a time of fasting, a time of reflection. They were going through this and feeling very good about themselves, what they were giving up, what they were resisting, and the like. But the real test of Lent came when a new group moved in their community who looked different, acted different, different language, different customs, different rituals. And these people going through this time of purification were mean and cruel to this new group. So Pierre Henry, Father Henry, chucked his Easter sermon and he said, we can't go around measuring our goodness by what we resist, what we deny, and who we exclude. We must measure our goodness by what we embrace, what we create, and who we include. What we embrace, what we create, and who we include. And a death camp survivor was asked, how on earth can we break this cycle of violence? And he said, each one of us must do 3 things. So I would invite each one of you as you go on your way in the various roles that you play, and especially our young people here, 3 things. Pay attention to what's going on around you. Get involved and never, ever look away. Thank you.